Hi, doll lovers all over the world. I'm here to talk to you about some wonderful dolls we have coming up in our auction in Las Vegas, named Kaleidoscope. I'm Florence Theriault, and I have handled, cataloged, and researched all 608 of the dolls that will be in this catalog, and there are beauties. Someone sent an email the other day. They said, "You have 72 Lenchies in that catalog. What are you doing?" So I went back and started counting. Yes, 72 Lenchies, 73 French bébés, and 86 art character dolls, and that doesn't begin to mention the Kathy Cruz, the Schoenhut, the American Cloth, the French Poupées, and all of the other wonderful pieces. So I have today the ability to show you three categories of dolls. I'm going to show you some of the art character dolls, I'm going to show you some of the French bébés, and I'm going to show you some of the 72 Lenchies that are in that auction. And we'll begin with German characters, and although this is not a German bisque art character, it is certainly a German art character, and some might say arguably the beginning of the series at the beginning of the 19th century, about 1908, 1909, 1910. This is a wonderful example by the German cloth doll maker Kathy Cruz, who created the most wistful, beautiful dolls. This one wearing wonderful antique costume that may be original, and it has beautiful, beautiful painting, oil-painted facial features. The face was pressed, features were pressed in, and then the complexion and the facial features and the hair were all hand-painted with fine oil paints. So in a way, you could say that those of you who are doll collectors, if you own a Kathy Cruz, you own a wonderful oil painting. It's just not hanging on your wall. Now, the German art character movement began in 1908 or 1909, and it was part of an overall movement of education going on at the time, believing that children were not idealized human beings. They were human beings. They were people that had moods. They were angry, they were pouting, they were crying, they were sad, and that dolls should reflect these kind of moods that children would have. And a lot of the doll makers that had been very popular up until that time, making the idealized dolly face doll, started to create their series of children with character, known as the art character dolls, or sometimes art character reform dolls, since the movement was designed to change it. Very, very prominent among this group was the Cameron Reinhardt Company, and they produced a series of dolls, their 100 series, beginning with 100, 101, 102, some of the models available to collectors today, and some of them so rare as to be virtually unknown. One of the most popular models was this particular girl called by the company called Marie. It was their 101 model. And we have here a very, very beautiful example because she's a little bit larger. The art character dolls, the larger they are, the more the definition is able to be defined on their face of the sculpting, because the painting is really quite simplistic, and you need to have size in order to get great definition, which of course is one of the reasons when you can find a small example of one of the 100 series dolls that has great modeling and expression, that it will be so important in the painting in the presentation of the doll. Now, the 101, so you could say, well, okay, I want to get one of each of these characters for my collection, but wait, let me show you, because I have 4 examples right here on my table, and I want to show you the variations that you could have. You could have variations of costume. You could have the brown complexioned model, which is extremely rare to find in this series. You could have a tiny little girl. And again, to find it with the complete original costume and original wig with these wonderful side-coiled braids is a very, very big feature and very desirable in these dolls. And in the small ones, you want to look for how much definition is there in the modeling of the bisque. And then you will find another example that will have, again, her original side-coiled braids. They didn't all have that wig, but it was a popular one that Cameron Reinhardt used, and when you can find it on these dolls, it's quite desirable. And in this one in particular, in the little red dress, I want you to look at the modeling of the facial planes of her, because I think she's extraordinary. The bisque on the Cameron Reinhardt would vary, the painting of the bisque. Some of them have what I refer to as a matte finish bisque. It's not grainy, but it doesn't have any gleam or luminosity to it at all. And others will have a very, very beautiful patina, a gleaming patina, luminous, as I very often say, and I'm teased about using the word luminous, but there it is. And then, so these were 5 examples of their very, very popular 101 model. And then, the other model that was so extremely popular is the 114 model. And this particular example from the Helen Welsh collection that we're selling in the Kaleidoscope auction is Hans. They actually marketed the doll as Hans, their 114 model. And he has super, super fine sculpting around his mouth, around his eyes, at his nose, and a wonderful costume with his great Teddy Roosevelt celluloid badge, which is not Teddy Roosevelt for president, but Teddy Roosevelt when he was a colonel. So just great, a great piece of combining a kind of a character doll that children would have with a popular theme, a popular American hero at the time, Teddy Roosevelt, which would be very contiguous with this particular doll. The dolls came in many costumes. The folklore costumes, as a little one has, is quite typical. Scottish costumes, both for German dolls and French dolls, were extremely popular, and I really don't quite understand why they were more popular than any others, but they do seem to be. And then, of course, always the schoolgirl, the little schoolgirl models, and their costumes were great. And 2 of the examples that we have coming up in the Kaleidoscope auction that are among the rare examples from the Cameron Reinhardt series is, first of all, their 107 model known as Carl. And this is a small fellow. Sometimes we've had them as large as this, but this example is so extraordinary, again, because even though he is small, the sculpting on his face is so extraordinary. Very, very deep furrows, like even the gaunt cheeks, the worried lines around the eyes, the fretful look of the mouth, which I think is kind of interesting since he's costumed in his antique bridegroom costume, which is absolutely delightful. But everything going for it. Wonderful bisque, fabulous sculpting, a great antique costume, original body. This is a real gem, and he is a rare example from that Cameron Reinhardt series. Another very, very beautiful girl is their 109 model, and this one with the very pensive, sweet expression. This particular model has sometimes a lot of variation in the expression of the face, but this one I find very, very endearing and has a soft look to it. So when you're judging these dolls, once again, experience, exposure, the more you can see, the better. When you make your choice, then you say, okay, this is a great example of the model that I want to find. And how do you get this exposure? You see every doll you can see. You can go to visit your friends who have collections. You go to shows. You come to our auctions. You will come to our auctions, and we honestly, well, of course, we'd like you to bid, but we really don't care if you just sit there all day and expose yourself to these extraordinary dolls that you will never again have a chance to see. Many of the museums, we've sold many museums, and people that couldn't visit those museums, they said, I had a chance to come to the preview of your auction, and I feel like I went to the museum. Do that. Get to see as many dolls as you can so you can make wonderful choices. Now, Cameron Reinhardt was one of the significant companies making these art character dolls, and they, sadly, were not great commercial successes, which, of course, means something today. Number one, it means that they're valuable because the art quality of them is so wonderful, but they're also valuable for what other one-word answer? Rarity. You do not find them very often. The dolls were first introduced, as I said, in 1909, 1910, and starting about 1914, we have World War I. There was the German doll industry practically closed down as far as selling anything to the United States, to Britain, to their biggest countries where they were selling dolls. And so that kind of killed off this art market before it had a chance to develop. But also, parents thought, I don't want my kids to play with a sad-looking little doll. I want her to have a beautiful, pretty doll. So it never was a really popular market. And there is a wonderful story, if any of you are lucky enough to own the Cieslick's German Doll Studies book. There's a wonderful story in there that reprinted from their original magazine in which they tell about the factories going in and smashing all of the remaining dolls they had in their stock, which, if you love dolls, that's pretty heartbreaking to think about. But there it is, and they're very rare to find today. Now, Cameron Reinhardt was not the only company making art character dolls. All of the other German companies kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and they ranged anywhere from Simon and Halbig to Gebrüder Heubach to even Kessner, with variations. We have two of the dolls from the Simon and Halbig art character series. They made 3 dolls in their 150 art character series. They made the 150. They had the 153, and we have 2 examples of these very, very rare characters that are being presented in the Kaleidoscope auction, and I'm showing them side by side because they really are big and little brother, and you can see their variations in size. This example from the Helen Welsh collection, and this example from the Evelyn Heiderprim collection, and they were both of them. It's so funny to have these 2 collections to come together, and these 2 brothers sort of come together in this auction because they kind of belong together, and these 2 diverse collections, I think this is one of the things I like most about the work I do, is seeing the vision that people had for the dolls that they were looking for. And I'm happy to have these 2 little guys come together. And I hope the whole time I'm talking away that the camera is picking up different planes of their faces. And in the case of this little boy, look at the sculpting even of the hair. On all of these art characters, the painting is very, very simple. There's not tremendous great eyelashes and eyebrows and things like that. The magic is in the original sculpture, which is very, very deep, showing, even if you're seeing here on the nose, little indentations at the side of the nose where the nostrils are, little hollows by the side of the eyes. Very, very difficult to do. I will tell you, when I'm writing my catalog descriptions, the art characters are the hardest ones to write the descriptions about, because you can't go on and on about their lushly painted lashes and things, because quite often they don't even have painted lashes. They have a suggestion of. So it's all in the sculpting. And these are 2 of the rarest models from art character series. They're almost impossible to find. To have 2 together and both wearing their original little sailor costumes is just so special, so very special. The company that was most prolific in the number of characters that they did was Gebrüder Heubach. And this company, in my opinion, is vastly underrated today because they had such a wide variety. The company began originally making figurines for the home, and many doll collectors collect these figurines with the children with very, very expressive faces. What the company ended up doing was using the same faces that were on their figurines and turning them into dolls by making it with a socket head that could be attached to a composition or a kid body, and thus having a little art character doll that a child could play with. Now, there are literally hundreds of models of the Gebrüder Heubach figures, and I'm going to show you that today, when we're talking about them, books that I want everybody to own if you don't have these books. This is a very, very simple book. It's a numerology of German doll marks according to the characters. And one of the reasons it's so important with the Gebrüder Heubachs, for example, is their model numbers are very, very difficult to read sometimes. So if you think you're reading the model number but you're not sure, you can go into this book and you can find the number referenced, and it will tell you a brief description of what the doll should look like and really help you get your doll identified. I brought you just a few examples. I think there are like 35 wonderful Gebrüder Heubach dolls in the auction in Las Vegas, and I brought you just a couple examples. These 2 little black dolls. This is one of the points I want to bring up to you about looking at dolls carefully, because your first glance when you look at these, you think that they're twins or they're duplicates, but they're not. They're different. There's different expressions in the sculpting and the painting of the faces. Look at the mouths. They are totally different, but wonderful, wonderful detail of these art character dolls, and just so totally perfect. And then this little fellow, who is affectionately known by collectors, and as soon as I say it, you'll know it's the proper name for him, as Spinach Boy. looking like a little boy who just tasted spinach, and he is not a happy fellow about it. The Heubach firm did wonderful dolls, and you could make a specialty of collecting their works and spend several decades doing just that. And then, even though people tend to focus on the same 4 or 5 firms making these dolls, I wanted to point out to you a few firms that I think are important and should be looked at more carefully. We have this wonderful boy, and if I ask you who was the maker of this, chances are 99 out of 100 of you would not get it at first thing. It was Adolf Wiz's Lenses. Now, if you're like I am, you think Adolf Wiz's Lenses, yeah, he made some pretty child dolls. They were nice, but you don't, let's face it, get all excited. Well, you should, because this company also made some absolutely fabulous art character dolls. And this is another example of one of the fellows, as I slowly turn him, pay attention to the sculpting planes on his face that give him this great characterization. And even at the back of the head, you see the details of the soft spot at the top of the head, the little neck hollow at the back, turning him around. Look at his little slightly oversized ears, and look at the wonderful, not just a smiling mouth, but impressed dimples well into the cheek. Very, very wonderful doll, marked simply AW with, of course, his model number. A very rare doll, and when you're looking to find what can I get into, I want to do art characters, but I don't own the bank, what can I get into? Some of these less known makers offer very, very good bargains in doll collecting to get a wonderful piece of art, in my opinion. And then another example, in this wonderful little girl, and she was made for Swain & Company, and many of their dolls were the ones marked DIP and Lori, and they're more well known. This one is a rarer example, and very, very precious face, unbelievably expressive detail of the modeling. And once again, the eyes are deeply set. They're not just a painted flat surface, but they actually have sculpting detail. Sculpting detail around the lips. All of these things make a difference. And need I say anything about her folklore costume, which is original and really, really fine. Again, look for some of these less well-known firms making the wonderful art character dolls. Look at the quality of sculpting of the face and make your judgment on that. And you'll put together a superb collection that people will say, wow, you really had foresight to be looking for some of these other makers.